The alarms were silent when I woke, and that silence was the first thing that told me something was wrong. I am Thessaly Vorkan, sovereign matriarch of the Veil Dominion. I have ruled for 300 cycles. I have felt fear before, the kind that comes with war councils and failed harvests and enemy fleets massing at the border. But nothing prepared me for the sound of my own feet slapping against cold stone as I ran barefoot through my palace at the darkest hour of the night, my robe half-tied, my heart's pounding so hard I thought they would crack my ribs. My daughter was gone. Lyra, 6 cycles old, my only child. The night guard outside her chamber had been found slumped against the wall, breathing but unconscious, no wound on her body that anyone could explain. The door to Lyra's room stood open. Her bed was empty, the blankets thrown back as if she had been lifted out mid-sleep. No blood, no sign of struggle, just absence, sitting in that room like a physical thing. I did not wait for my ministers. I did not wait for my master of arms to organize a proper search. I ran through the halls myself, screaming my daughter's name until my voice cracked, until servants pressed themselves against the walls in shock at the sight of their matriarch unraveling in front of them. It was Kestrel Adane, my master of arms, who finally caught up to me near the west stairwell. He was breathless, his uniform askew, and the look on his face told me he was about to say something that would make everything worse. "Your Grace," he said, "the human is missing too." For one terrible heartbeat, I understood those words in the worst possible way. I thought of every whispered rumor in my court, every suspicious glance thrown at the small handful of humans who served in my guard, every minister who had told me it was reckless to let an unknown species so close to the royal family. I thought of Corvin Reyes, barely 3 months in my service, and I thought, he has taken her. "Where?" I said. It was not a question, it was a demand that the universe answer immediately or suffer for its delay. "We do not know, Your Grace. His post was near the East Wing. He is gone." No sign of him either. Something in me went very cold and very quiet, the way the sky goes quiet before a storm breaks. I turned to the nearest guard captain. "Seal every exit from this palace. No one leaves. No one. If the human has taken my daughter, I want him found before the sun rises, and I want him found by me." But even as I gave that order, some smaller, stubborn part of my mind refused to accept it. I had watched Corvin Reyes train with my guard for 3 months. I had watched him carry an injured soldier twice his weight across a training yard without complaint. I had watched him, on more than one occasion, kneel down to speak with Lyra when she wandered into the courtyard, patient in a way that many of my own soldiers were not, answering her endless questions about his strange homeworld with a gentleness that had, more than once, made me forget to be suspicious of him. I did not want to believe he had hurt her, but I did not have the luxury of trusting my instincts that night. I had only the empty room, and the missing child, and the missing guard, and a growing dread that threatened to swallow me whole. We searched every hall, every tower, every garden. Guards moved through the palace like a rising tide, checking every door, every window, every place a child might be hidden or a traitor might flee. Hours passed. My voice gave out entirely. I stood in the great hall at one point, surrounded by ministers offering theories I could not bear to hear, and I felt something inside me beginning to break. It was a servant girl, young and terrified, who finally gave us the thread we needed. She had seen a shadow moving near the old aqueduct entrance in the East Wing, a passage sealed off for nearly a century, forgotten by most of the palace records. She had been too frightened to speak of it until my master of arms found her hiding in a linen closet, shaking. I did not wait for a full contingent of soldiers. I took 6 guards and Kestrel and I ran. The aqueduct tunnels beneath the palace had been built centuries ago to carry water from the mountain springs, long since replaced by modern systems and left to gather dust and silence. The air down there was damp and cold, and our torchlight barely pushed back the darkness. My hearts were pounding so hard I could hear them over my own footsteps. We found the first sign of struggle near a junction of 3 tunnels. Scuff marks on the stone, a dropped length of rope, cut clean through. My stomach turned to ice. Then we heard it, a voice, low and steady, coming from somewhere ahead, not shouting, not pleading, just talking, calm and unhurried, the way someone might talk to soothe a frightened animal. I signaled for silence and moved forward, my guards fanning out behind me, weapons ready. We rounded a bend into what had once been a cistern hall, a wide chamber with a domed ceiling and a dry basin at its center, lit only by a single fallen torch that guttered against the stone floor. What I saw stopped me completely. 3 figures lay motionless on the ground, spaced apart, as if they had fallen at different moments during a struggle. They were not soldiers I recognized. Their clothing was plain, deliberately unremarkable, the kind of clothing someone wears when they do not want to be identified. Restraint tools lay scattered near them, tools clearly meant for a child far smaller than any grown Vale. And in the center of the chamber, sitting with his back against the stone pillar, one arm held awkwardly against his side, was Corvin Reyes. His uniform was torn at the shoulder. There was a dark stain along his sleeve that I did not want to think too hard about. His face was pale beneath the strange pink undertone of human skin, and there was a tightness around his eyes that spoke of pain he was working very hard not to show. And curled against his chest, wrapped in his uniform jacket, one small hand fisted in the fabric near his collar, was my daughter. She was asleep, not unconscious, not hurt. Asleep, the way children sleep when they finally feel safe enough to stop fighting exhaustion, her breathing slow and even, her face utterly peaceful. I do not know how long I stood there. Time seemed to fold in on itself. My guards moved past me toward the fallen intruders, checking for signs of life, restraining the 2 who still breathed. I barely registered any of it. My whole world had narrowed down to that small, sleeping shape, and the human holding her like she was the only thing in the universe worth protecting. Corvin looked up at me, and even through the obvious pain, there was something almost apologetic in his expression, as if he were the one who owed me an explanation for surviving. "Your Grace," he said quietly, careful not to raise his voice and wake her. "I'm sorry it took so long to get word to you. I didn't want to move her while she was still shaking. Took a while to get her calm enough to sleep." I knelt down across from him, my legs finally giving out from beneath me, though I told myself it was simply easier to see my daughter clearly from that angle. "Your shoulder," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Dislocated, not broken. I'll manage." He said it the way one might mention a minor inconvenience, a spilled drink, a missed meal, not the way one should describe an injury sustained while fighting off armed intruders alone in a forgotten tunnel beneath a palace. I looked past him at the 3 bodies my guards were now examining. 2 breathing, restrained. 1 very clearly not going to trouble anyone again. I understood, in that moment, exactly what kind of fight had taken place in this chamber, and exactly what it had cost him to make sure my daughter walked away from it untouched. "Tell me what happened," I said. "From the beginning. Leave nothing out." He shifted slightly, careful not to disturb Lyra, and began to speak in that same low, steady voice. He had been walking the perimeter near the east wing, he said, a routine patrol he had done a dozen times before. He noticed a service door that should have been locked standing slightly open. Most guards would have called it in and waited for backup. He said he almost did exactly that, but something about the silence in that hallway had felt wrong to him, the kind of wrong that made the hair on his arms stand up. And he had learned, back on his homeworld, not to ignore that feeling. He went to check it alone, meaning only to look, not to engage. That was when he heard Lyra crying, faint and muffled, coming from somewhere below. "I should have called for backup the second I heard her," he admitted, guilt flickering across his face. "But I didn't know how long they'd been carrying her, or how far they still had to go before they reached wherever they were taking her. Every second I spent waiting for backup was another second further away from getting her back safely. I made a call. I'd make it again." He had followed the sound down into the old tunnels, moving as quietly as he could, until he found the 3 intruders in the cistern hall, already preparing to move Lyra further, deeper into passages that led, as we would later confirm, to a service exit near the old outer wall, one that would have put her outside the palace grounds entirely within minutes. "There were 3 of them and 1 of me," he said simply. "I didn't have time to think about odds. I just moved." He did not go into great detail about what happened next, and I did not press him for it. Not there in that chamber with my daughter still sleeping against his chest, but I could see enough. The precision of it, the economy. 3 intruders, 3 outcomes, and my daughter untouched in the middle of it all, protected the entire time. She was so scared when I got to her, he continued, his voice softening in a way that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with something gentler. Once it was over, she just grabbed onto me and wouldn't let go, wouldn't stop shaking. I figured getting her calm mattered more than getting a message out 5 minutes faster. I'm sorry if that decision worried you, Your Grace. It felt like the right one at the time. I did not answer him immediately, because I could not trust my own voice. I looked at my daughter's face, peaceful and unmarked, and I thought of every version of this night that could have happened instead. I thought of how close I had come to losing her, and how the only reason I had not was because one guard, 3 months into my service, and still regarded with quiet suspicion by half my court, had chosen without hesitation to put himself between my child and whatever fate those intruders had intended for her. Why did you not simply subdue them and wait for reinforcements once she was safe? I asked, though I already suspected I knew the answer. Because I didn't know if there were more of them further down the tunnel, he said, and because the second I had her, all I could think about was getting her calm and getting her out. Reinforcements can handle 3 unconscious men on the ground. They can't undo a scared kid's night if I don't get that part right first. Kestrel approached then, kneeling beside us, his expression a complicated mixture of relief and something that looked almost like respect, an expression I had rarely seen him direct toward anyone outside our own people. Your Grace, the 2 who are still breathing are being taken for questioning. We'll know more soon about who sent them and why. I nodded, though in that moment I found it difficult to care about the answer. I would care later. I would care very much later, when the investigation revealed exactly which of my rivals had grown bold enough to attempt something so brazen, and I would deal with that threat with the full weight of my authority. But in that chamber, kneeling on cold stone with my daughter finally safe, none of it felt urgent. Let us get her to the healers, I said, and you as well. That shoulder needs attention. She should probably stay asleep as long as possible, Corvin said. If it's all the same to you, Your Grace, I can carry her up. I don't want her waking up in a stranger's arms. If she stirs on the way, she knows my voice by now. Might keep her calmer. It should have struck me as strange, perhaps even inappropriate, that a guard 3 months into his service would speak so confidently about what was best for my daughter's well-being. And yet in that moment, it struck me as nothing but simple, obvious truth. He was right. She did know his voice. She had spent enough afternoons in the courtyard listening to him describe strange things like oceans that covered most of a planet, and animals called dogs that lived alongside his people out of loyalty rather than obligation, that his presence had become, without my fully realizing it, a source of comfort to her. I allowed it. I walked beside him the entire way back through the tunnels and up through the palace, watching my daughter sleep undisturbed against a stranger's shoulder, a stranger who had bled to keep her that way. The healers saw to his shoulder first, at my insistence, though he protested that Lyra should be checked over before him. I overruled him. It was, I realized later, the first order I had given all night that felt like it belonged to a ruler rather than a frightened mother, and even then, it was really just the mother speaking through the authority of the crown. Lyra woke briefly while the healers examined her, confused and disoriented, until she saw me and immediately reached for me instead, which brought a fresh wave of relief so powerful it nearly buckled my knees again. But even in her confusion, half asleep, she asked a single question before drifting off once more. Where is Corvin? Is he okay? I told her he was safe, that he was being looked after, and that seemed to satisfy her enough to let sleep take her again. It was near dawn by the time the immediate chaos settled into something manageable. The 2 surviving intruders were secured for questioning. Physicians confirmed Lyra had no lasting injuries beyond exhaustion and fright. Corvin's shoulder was set properly, and he sat in the healing wing with his arm bound against his chest, looking every bit as tired as I felt, though he tried to hide it when he noticed me approaching. You do not need to stand or bow or perform any of the usual formalities right now, I told him before he could attempt any of it. I think we are both past the point of ceremony tonight. He gave a tired half-smile. Wasn't really planning on standing anyway, Your Grace. Not sure my legs would cooperate. I sat beside his bed, something I doubt any matriarch before me had ever done for a guard of any species, let alone one so new to my service. "I owe you a debt I do not know how to repay," I said. "You risked your life for my daughter without hesitation, without waiting for orders, without any guarantee that anyone would even know what you had done until it was over." "I wasn't thinking about repayment when I went down there," he said. "I was thinking about a scared kid alone, with people who meant her harm. Where I come from, that's not really a decision you have to think hard about. You just go. Many would have called for backup first. Many would have waited. Maybe. I'm not saying I made the only right choice, the one that felt right at the time, with the information I had." He shifted slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at his shoulder. "For what it's worth, Your Grace, she's a brave kid. Barely cried the whole time, once she stopped being scared of the dark. Just kept asking when she'd see you again." Something in my chest tightened at that, something warm and aching at the same time. I thought of all the ways I had been taught to think of humans since they first arrived in our part of the galaxy years ago. Unpredictable, difficult to categorize. Prone to a kind of stubborn loyalty that some of my advisors found unsettling rather than admirable. I had accepted him into my guard cautiously, more as a diplomatic gesture toward his species than out of any real trust, and I had, if I was honest with myself, never fully expected him to prove himself the way he had that night. "You will be commended, of course," I said, "publicly and appropriately, once the full details of tonight's events are made known. But I wanted you to hear this from me first, without ceremony attached to it. Thank you, not as your matriarch, as her mother." He looked genuinely uncomfortable with the gratitude. In the particular way I had noticed some humans grew uncomfortable when praised for things they considered simply the right thing to do, rather than anything extraordinary. "You don't need to make a big thing out of it, Your Grace. I'm just glad she's okay." I stayed with him a while longer, long enough for the exhaustion in his face to finally win out over his effort to appear composed in front of his ruler. Eventually the healers insisted he rest properly, and I allowed myself to be led away as well, back toward my own chambers, though I stopped first at Lyra's room to sit beside her bed and watch her sleep, unwilling to be anywhere else for the remainder of that long night. In the days that followed, the investigation revealed exactly what I had feared, that the attempt had come from a faction within my own court, who believed my rule too soft, too willing to extend trust to species like the humans, who had only recently entered our alliance. They had hoped to use my daughter as leverage, or worse, to remove her as a future claimant to the throne entirely, believing the chaos that would follow might create an opening for their own ambitions. I dealt with that threat as it needed to be dealt with, but it was not the punishment of my enemies that stayed with me in the weeks that followed. It was the memory of that cistern hall, and the sight of a human guard who had walked into danger without hesitation, not because it was his duty, but because a frightened child needed someone to come for her, and he had simply decided that someone would be him. I had ruled for 300 cycles. I had built alliances and broken enemies, and made decisions that shaped the fate of entire worlds. But in that quiet moment in the tunnels beneath my own palace, watching my daughter sleep safely in the arms of someone my court had once regarded with suspicion, I understood something I had never fully grasped before. Trust is not measured in the words a species speaks, or the customs they follow, or how long they have served beside you. It is measured in the moment everything is on the line, and someone chooses to stand anyway. Corvin Reyes remained in my guard long after that night, eventually rising to oversee the protection of the royal family entirely, a position no human had ever held in the history of the Vale Dominion. Lyra grew up considering him something close to family, and in the years that followed, I never once had cause to regret the trust I placed in him from that night forward. But I have never forgotten the sight that stopped me cold in that ancient cistern hall. My daughter, safe and sleeping, held by a stranger who had bled to keep her that way, asking for nothing in return except the chance to see her safe again. Some debts are not meant to be repaid, they are meant to be honored, quietly, for as long as you live. And I have honored his, every day since.